My name is Gabrielle. I'm 34 years old, and I'm currently driving home from what might be the last family gathering I'll ever attend. My hands are still shaking on the steering wheel, and I can feel the dried mascara streaking down my cheeks. 3 hours ago, in front of 47 relatives and friends, my mother looked directly at me and said the words that finally broke something inside me. "We wish Emma were our only child." The entire room went silent. My younger sister Emma stood there, with that familiar victorious smile spreading across her face. And in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. Before I reveal what really happened at that party, and the secrets I finally exposed, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe if stories about family dynamics and finding your voice resonate with you. And trust me, what I'm about to share will make you rethink everything about family loyalty. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, our family looked perfect from the outside. My father, Robert, was a prestigious lawyer with Irish roots who commanded respect in every courtroom he entered. My mother, Patricia, was a cardiac surgeon who saved lives by day and controlled ours by night. We lived in a 7-bedroom colonial house with perfectly manicured lawns and a pool that sparkled like something out of a magazine. Then there was Emma, 3 years younger than me, born when I was just starting to form my first memories. I remember the day they brought her home from the hospital. I was 3 years old, sitting on our cream-colored couch, excited to meet my baby sister. The moment my parents walked through that door, something shifted in our house. It wasn't immediate or obvious, but looking back now, I can pinpoint that as the moment I became invisible in my own home. By the time I was 5, I had discovered I could draw. My kindergarten teacher called my parents to tell them I had exceptional artistic talent for my age. I remember running home that day, my little backpack bouncing on my shoulders, clutching the drawing that Mrs. Henderson had praised. It was a detailed sketch of our house with every window perfectly proportioned, something unusual for a 5-year-old. My parents barely glanced at it. Emma, who was 2, had just spoken her first complete sentence, and that was all they could talk about at dinner. My drawing ended up in the trash by evening. When I turned 8, I won second place in the state piano competition. I had practiced 4 hours every single day for 6 months, my small fingers struggling to reach the octaves in Chopin's waltz in C-sharp minor. The day of the competition, my parents almost forgot to drive me there. Emma, 5 years old at the time, could read at a 3rd-grade level, and they had scheduled a meeting with a gifted program coordinator that same afternoon. They dropped me off at the venue and said they'd try to make it back for my performance. They didn't. I played to an audience of strangers, won my trophy, and waited outside for 2 hours until they remembered to pick me up. My 10th birthday was supposed to be special. Double digits, my parents had promised a party at the roller rink with all my friends. I had handed out invitations 2 weeks prior, picked out my outfit, and even saved my allowance to buy special friendship bracelets for everyone who would attend. The morning of my birthday, Emma woke up with a slight fever, 99.2 degrees. My mother canceled the party immediately. She spent the entire day by Emma's bedside, reading her stories and making her special soup. I spent my 10th birthday alone in my room, calling each friend to apologize that the party was canceled. Emma's fever broke by lunch, and by evening, she was running around the house perfectly fine. At 12, I made the national junior swimming team. Years of waking up at 4:30 in the morning, swimming laps until my lungs burned, had finally paid off. The qualifying meet was in Boston, only 2 hours away. My parents promised they would be there. I remember standing on the starting block, scanning the crowd for their faces. The gun went off, and I dove into that pool with everything I had. I shaved 3 seconds off my personal best and secured my spot on the team. When I climbed out of the pool, my coach was the only one there to congratulate me. My parents had taken Emma to her violin recital instead. She was playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with the beginner group, but apparently that was more important than their older daughter achieving a national ranking. High school brought new opportunities for disappointment. When I was 16, I received a full scholarship to Yale. Not partial, not need-based, but a complete academic scholarship based on merit alone. I had maintained a perfect GPA while taking every advanced placement class our school offered, served as president of 3 clubs, and volunteered 20 hours a week at the local hospital. I ran home with the acceptance letter, my heart pounding with excitement. This was it, I thought. This would finally make them proud. My mother was in the kitchen when I burst through the door. She was helping Emma with her algebra homework, even though Emma was perfectly capable of doing it herself. I placed the letter on the counter, my hands trembling with anticipation. My mother read it slowly, her expression never changing. When she finished, she set it down and said 7 words that I'll never forget. "Well, Emma will probably get into Harvard." That was it. No congratulations, no pride, no celebration. Emma looked up from her homework with that smirk she had perfected over the years, and I realized nothing I did would ever be enough. Prom night was perhaps the smallest cruelty, but somehow it cut the deepest. Every other parent was taking photos fussing over their daughter's dresses and their date's bow ties. My date, a sweet boy named Christopher, kept asking where my parents were. I made excuses, said they were running late from work. The truth was, they had forgotten entirely. They were at Emma's friend's house, helping set up for a sleepover party. When Christopher's parents offered to drive me home after prom, I accepted, but asked them to drop me off at the corner. I walked the last 3 miles in my prom dress and heels, my feet bleeding by the time I reached our doorstep. I found my parents in the living room laughing at something Emma was showing them on her phone. They didn't even notice I had come home. Graduation day should have been my moment. I was valedictorian, had been accepted to Yale, and was giving the speech to 1,500 people. I had practiced that speech for weeks, pouring my heart into every word about perseverance and achieving dreams despite obstacles. As I walked to the podium, I spotted my parents in the audience. They were seated 5 rows back, despite arriving early enough for front row seats. Emma had complained she couldn't see well from too close, so they moved. I delivered my speech to thunderous applause, but when I looked at my parents, my mother was showing Emma something on her phone, and my father was checking his watch. That night, there was no special dinner, no celebration, no acknowledgement that their daughter had just graduated at the top of her class from one of the most competitive high schools in Connecticut. Emma had a headache, so the family went to bed early. I sat alone in my room looking at my acceptance letter to Yale and made a decision that would shape the next decade of my life. If they couldn't see me when I was right in front of them, maybe they'd notice when I was gone. The day I left for Yale, I packed my entire life into 2 suitcases and a backpack. My parents offered to drive me, but I declined telling them I had already arranged a ride with a friend. The truth was, I took a taxi, paying for it with money I had saved from tutoring other students. As the cab pulled away from the house, I didn't look back. I was 18 years old and absolutely determined to build a life that didn't depend on their validation. Yale was everything I had hoped for and more. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who saw me, who valued my contributions, who celebrated my achievements. I threw myself into my studies with a hunger that surprised even me. I decided to double major in economics and computer science, a combination that would prove more valuable than I could have imagined at the time. To pay for everything beyond tuition, I worked 3 jobs. Monday and Wednesday mornings, I served coffee at the campus cafe starting at 5:30 in the morning. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, I tutored struggling students in calculus and statistics. Weekends were spent doing freelance coding projects I found online. I was exhausted, but for the first time in my life, I was building something that was entirely mine. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving my freshman year, or my sophomore year, or any year after that. My parents called the first year asking why I wasn't coming home. I told them I had to work, which was partially true. The fuller truth was that I had been invited to my roommate Jennifer's house, where her family treated me like I had always belonged at their table. Her mother hugged me when I walked through the door. Her father asked about my studies with genuine interest, and her younger brother challenged me to video games after dinner. It was the first Thanksgiving where I didn't feel like an afterthought. By junior year, I had stopped making excuses for not coming home. The calls from my parents became less frequent, which suited me perfectly. Emma would occasionally text, usually to ask for help with her college applications or to borrow money. I ignored most of them. The few times I did respond, it was with polite but firm refusals. I was done being the family ATM machine, especially when they couldn't even remember my birthday. Senior year brought opportunities I had never dared to dream about. My professors in the computer science department had taken notice of my work, particularly a healthcare algorithm I had developed that could predict cardiac events with 92% accuracy. One professor, Dr. Sarah Chen, pulled me aside after class one day. She had contacts in Silicon Valley who were looking for exactly the kind of innovation I was creating. More importantly, she saw potential in me that my own family never had. I graduated summa cum laude from Yale without a single family member in attendance. I told them the wrong date, deliberately said it was a week later than it actually was. As I walked across that stage to receive my diploma, I felt lighter than I had in years. Jennifer's family was there, cheering loudly when they called my name. That evening over dinner at a small Italian restaurant, Jennifer's father raised his glass and said something that made me cry for the first time in years. He said he was proud of me, that watching me overcome everything to achieve this was inspiring. It was the first time anyone had ever said those words to me and meant them. 3 weeks after graduation, Jennifer and I were sitting in my tiny studio apartment surrounded by empty pizza boxes and computer screens, building what would become MedPredict. The idea was simple, but revolutionary: use machine learning to analyze patient data and predict potential health crises before they happened. We worked 18-hour days, survived on ramen noodles and sheer determination, and slowly built something extraordinary. Within 6 months, we had our first hospital contract. Within a year, we had 5. By the time I was 26, MedPredict was being valued at $50 million by venture capitalists who couldn't write checks fast enough. The technology we had developed was saving lives, literally preventing heart attacks and strokes before they happened. Medical journals were calling it revolutionary. Time magazine included me in their 30 under 30 list, though I used a pseudonym for the article to maintain my privacy. When I was 28, a larger healthcare technology company approached us with an offer we couldn't refuse. They wanted to buy MedPredict and integrate our technology into their global platform. The number they offered was staggering. After taxes and splitting with Jennifer, I walked away with $15 million. I was 28 years old, financially independent, and had built something that was making a real difference in the world. But I told my family none of this. As far as they knew, I was working in IT support for a small company in New York. When they occasionally asked about my life, usually through obligatory holiday texts, I kept my responses vague and brief. The one time my mother called to ask if I could help Emma with her latest business venture, a boutique clothing store that was already failing, I told her I was barely making ends meet myself. The lie came easily without guilt. I used my newfound wealth carefully. I bought a penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook Central Park. But I told no one in my family. When Emma asked where I lived during one of her random check-ins, I told her I was renting a studio in Queens. The truth was, my apartment had 3 bedrooms, a library, and a terrace, where I grew herbs and watched the sunrise over Manhattan. My charitable giving became my secret joy. Every year, I anonymously donated $2 million to organizations that supported neglected and abandoned children. I funded scholarships for kids who were overlooked in their families, the middle children, the quiet ones, the ones whose achievements went unnoticed. I sat on the board of directors under a pseudonym, reading their application letters, seeing myself in their stories of being invisible in their own homes. 3 years ago, I met Marcus at a medical technology conference. He was presenting his startup's new diagnostic tool, and I was there scouting for investment opportunities. He was brilliant, kind, and most importantly, he saw me. Not my bank account, not my connections, not what I could do for him, but me. We talked until 3 in the morning about everything from artificial intelligence to our favorite movies from the 90s. Marcus came from a close-knit family who had Sunday dinners together, and group texts that were actually fun to read. When he eventually asked about my family, I was honest for the first time in years. I told him about growing up invisible, about Emma, the golden child, about parents who couldn't see past their favorite daughter. He listened without judgment, held my hand when my voice cracked, and never once suggested I should reconcile for the sake of family harmony. We had been together for 3 years, and my family still didn't know he existed. Marcus understood why I kept him secret. He had seen the occasional text from Emma asking for money, the birthday cards that arrived a week late with my name spelled wrong, the Christmas gifts that were obviously re-gifted items Emma didn't want. He understood why I needed to keep the good parts of my life separate from them. While I was building my empire in secret, Emma was following a very different path. She had dropped out of college in her second year, claiming the professors didn't understand her artistic vision. My parents immediately funded an art studio for her, convinced she was going to be the next Basquiat. 6 months and $50,000 later, she had produced exactly 3 paintings, all of which looked like something a kindergartner might create during finger painting time. Next came the jewelry business. Emma convinced our parents that she had a gift for design, that all she needed was startup capital to launch her luxury jewelry line. They mortgaged their house to give her $200,000. The business lasted 8 months. The inventory disappeared, supposedly stolen, though no police report was ever filed. Emma claimed depression and checked herself into a luxury rehabilitation center that cost more than most people's annual salary. The rehabilitation center became a revolving door. 5 times in 6 years, Emma checked in for various issues, stress, exhaustion, anxiety, and twice for what she called creative burnout. Each stay cost $30,000, which my parents paid without question. They sold their vacation home in the Hamptons to cover the costs, telling everyone Emma was simply too sensitive for this harsh world. By the time Emma turned 31, she had burned through 3 more business ventures, all funded by our increasingly desperate parents. A yoga studio that never opened, a fashion blog that never published, and most recently a life coaching business despite having no qualifications or life experience to speak of. She still lived in our parents' house in the same room she had as a child, surrounded by vision boards and positive affirmations that never seemed to manifest into actual achievement. Meanwhile, I had quietly written a book under a pseudonym about healing from emotional neglect. Invisible No More spent 6 months on the bestseller list and had been translated into 15 languages. I received thousands of letters from readers who saw themselves in my story, who had also grown up unseen in houses full of people. The book's success led to speaking engagements and workshops, all conducted under my pen name, building a community of survivors who understood that sometimes family is the wound, not the cure. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 40 days before my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. It came via email from my mother's assistant, not even from a family member directly. The subject line read, "Save the date, Robert and Patricia's Ruby anniversary celebration." The email was formal cold, addressed to Gabrielle, with no warmth, no personal note, just the details and an RSVP link. I stared at that email for 20 minutes, coffee growing cold in my hands. 40 years of marriage, 4 decades of building a life together, raising children, creating what looked like the perfect family from the outside. The invitation made it clear this would be a large affair. They had rented out the country club where my father had been a member for 30 years. There would be cocktails, a 5-course dinner, speeches, and dancing. Emma had been put in charge of organizing everything, though I knew my mother's assistant would do all the actual work while Emma took credit. Marcus found me that evening, sitting in the dark laptop still open to the invitation. He didn't say anything at first, just sat beside me and waited. That was one of the things I loved most about him. He knew when to push and when to just be present. Finally, I showed him the email. He read it twice, his jaw tightening slightly when he noticed it had come from an assistant rather than my family directly. That night we talked until dawn about whether I should go. Marcus played devil's advocate, asking questions that forced me to examine my motivations. Did I want to go to prove something? Was I hoping for reconciliation? Was this about closure? The honest answer was I didn't know. Part of me, the little girl who had once drawn pictures for her parents' approval, wanted to believe this could be different. The adult who had built a life without them knew better. I decided to call Dr. Jennifer Chen, my therapist, for an emergency session. I had been seeing her for 2 years, working through the complex trauma of childhood emotional neglect. She had helped me understand that my parents' inability to see me wasn't my failure, but theirs. In her office, surrounded by soft lighting and the smell of lavender, I laid out my dilemma. Should I attend this anniversary party? What would I hope to achieve? Dr. Chen asked me to envision 2 scenarios. In the first, I didn't attend. How would I feel in a month, a year, 5 years? Would I regret not going? In the second, I attended, and everything went exactly as it always had. I would be ignored, Emma would be celebrated, and I would leave feeling invisible again. Could I handle that? Was I strong enough now to witness their indifference without it destroying the self-worth I had fought so hard to build? Over the next 3 sessions, we prepared for every possibility. We role-played different scenarios, from being completely ignored to being asked for money to unexpected confrontations. Dr. Chen helped me establish boundaries and, more importantly, gave me permission to leave at any time if things became too painful. The goal, she said, wasn't to change them or win their approval. The goal was to show up as my authentic self and let that be enough. Marcus offered to come with me repeatedly. He wanted to be there as support, as witness, as protection if needed. But I knew bringing him would complicate things. My family didn't know about him, and introducing my successful, loving partner at this event would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. More importantly, I needed to face this alone, to stand in that room as just Gabrielle, not as half of a couple. 2 weeks before the event, I went shopping for a dress. I could afford anything I wanted, but I chose carefully. Nothing too flashy that would draw attention, nothing too plain that would make me fade into the background. I settled on a simple black Versace dress that retailed for $8,000, but looked like it could have come from anywhere. It was elegant without being ostentatious, sophisticated without screaming money. I also made a decision about transportation. My Tesla Model S would raise questions, so I rented a 10-year-old Toyota Camry, the kind of car someone working in IT support might drive. I had learned to hide my success so thoroughly that these deceptions came naturally now. It was easier to pretend to be ordinary than to explain how I had become extraordinary without them. The night before the party, Marcus gave me a gift. It was a simple diamond necklace with the inscription on the back that read, "Remember your worth." He fastened it around my neck and made me promise to touch it whenever I felt myself shrinking in that room. It was a talisman, a reminder that my value didn't depend on their recognition. I spent that night writing in my journal 20 pages of everything I wanted to say, but knew I never would. I wrote about the birthdays, they forgot the achievements, they dismissed the tears they never saw. I wrote about the life I had built without them, the love I had found despite them, the success that belonged entirely to me. Then I closed the journal and made a decision. I would go to this party, but I would go as myself. Not the invisible daughter they remembered, but the woman I had become. The morning of the party, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. I went through my usual morning routine, meditation, yoga, coffee on my terrace overlooking the park. I responded to emails from my investment partners, reviewed a proposal for a new medical startup, and had a video call with Jennifer about our latest venture. Normal life, my real life, the one my family knew nothing about. As I got dressed that afternoon, I made one final decision. I would arrive 30 minutes late, not late enough to be rude, but late enough to avoid the awkward small talk before dinner. Late enough that I could slip in quietly and find my seat without fanfare. I didn't want a grand entrance. I just wanted to observe, to see if anything had changed, to give them one last chance to see me. The drive to Connecticut felt both endless and too quick. As I crossed from New York into Connecticut, memories flooded back. This was the route we used to take to visit my grandmother before she died, back when I still believed I was part of this family. By the time I reached the country club parking lot, my hands were trembling slightly. I sat in the rental car for 5 minutes, touching the necklace Marcus had given me, reminding myself that I had survived worse than whatever was waiting inside. The country club looked exactly as it had during my childhood, all white columns and manicured gardens, trying desperately to evoke some antebellum elegance despite being built in the 1970s. I could hear laughter and music drifting from the ballroom as I walked through the parking lot. My parents had clearly spared no expense. There were valet attendants, though I had parked myself in elaborate flower arrangements flanking the entrance. I entered through the main doors and immediately saw the sign directing guests to the Patricia and Robert anniversary celebration. The hallway was lined with photos of my parents throughout their marriage. I noticed there were exactly 3 photos that included me, all from before Emma was born. In contrast, Emma appeared in at least 30 photos documenting every stage of her life from infant to adult. The ballroom was packed with approximately 50 guests, maybe more. I recognized most of them, my parents' colleagues, country club friends, distant relatives who emerged for major events, and of course, Emma's entire social circle. The room was decorated in ruby red and gold, with elaborate centerpieces that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner, and waiters circulated with champagne and canapes. I saw my parents before they saw me. They were holding court near the bar, my father in his best navy suit, my mother in a burgundy gown that complemented the party's theme perfectly. Emma stood beside them in a white dress that cost at least $15,000, judging by the designer and the crystal detailing. She was laughing at something someone had set her hand possessively on our mother's arm, marking her territory as the favored daughter. My Aunt Margaret noticed me first. She was my father's older sister, a woman who had always been kind to me in a distant sort of way. She approached with air kisses and the obligatory small talk. How was work? Was I seeing anyone? Had I lost weight? But then she said something that set the tone for the evening. You look tired, dear. Emma looks absolutely radiant tonight, doesn't she? She's been such a help with planning all this. I made my way through the crowd, exchanging brief pleasantries with people who barely remembered my name. Several of them called me Emily or Elena, confusing me with Emma, or forgetting my name entirely. No one asked about my life beyond surface questions. No one knew about my company, my book, my relationship, the entire life I had built. To them, I was still just the other daughter, the one who wasn't Emma. When I finally approached my parents, my mother looked through me for a moment before recognition dawned. "Oh, Gabrielle," she said as if surprised I had shown up despite sending an invitation. "You made it. No hug, no kiss, just that flat acknowledgement." My father nodded in my direction before immediately returning to his conversation with a colleague about a recent case. Emma's greeting was more animated, but only because she had an audience. She squealed and hugged me, performing the role of loving sister for the crowd. Then, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, she said, "I'm so glad you could take time off from your little job to be here. Mom and Dad were worried you wouldn't be able to afford the gas money to drive up." Several people chuckled, and I felt that familiar shrinking feeling like I was becoming invisible right there in the crowded room. The seating arrangements told me everything I needed to know about my place in the celebration. The head table was reserved for my parents, Emma, and my parents' closest friends, the Worthingtons. I was seated at table 8 in the back corner near the kitchen doors. My table mates included distant cousins I hadn't seen in a decade, and my parents' accountant's wife who spent the entire cocktail hour complaining about the drive from New Jersey. As dinner was served, I watched Emma work the room like a professional politician. She stopped at every table, touched every shoulder, laughed at every joke. She was performing, and everyone was buying it. Several people commented on how devoted she was to our parents, how lucky they were to have such a caring daughter. The irony wasn't lost on me, that the caring daughter still lived at home at 31, unemployed and financially dependent. The speeches began after the third course. My father's business partner spoke about integrity and partnership. My mother's best friend talked about dedication and love. Then Emma took the microphone, and I knew something devastating was coming. I could see it in her smile, that particular expression she wore when she was about to be especially cruel. Emma spoke for 20 minutes. 20 excruciating minutes about being the perfect daughter, about the bond she shared with our parents, about the businesses they had supported her through. She listed her achievements, all 15 of them, each one either purchased by our parents or completely fabricated. She talked about her new business venture, the fourth one in 2 years, a wellness company that our parents had just invested $500,000 in. But it was her closing that made my blood run cold. She raised her champagne glass and said, "To my amazing parents, who always knew who deserved their love and investment, thank you for always believing in your real daughter, the one who stayed, the one who cared, the one who mattered." The room erupted in applause, and I saw several people wiping away tears. Emma looked directly at me. As she said it, that victorious smile spreading across her face. My mother stood up next. Patricia commanded attention in any room, and tonight was no exception. She was poised, elegant, every inch the successful surgeon. She began by thanking everyone for coming, for celebrating 4 decades of marriage. She talked about the challenges they had overcome, the life they had built, the legacy they were leaving. Then she turned to the subject of children. Robert and I have been blessed with 2 daughters, she began, and my heart stupidly hoped for a moment of inclusion. But Emma, she continued, Emma has been our greatest joy. Sometimes I wonder what we did to deserve her. She's everything we could have wanted in a child, beautiful, creative, devoted. She paused, taking a sip of champagne, and then looked directly at me. Honestly, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent room, we wish Emma were our only child. Life would have been so much simpler, so much more perfect. Some children just don't turn out the way you hope despite your best efforts. The disappointment has been hard to bear, but at least we got one right. The silence that followed was deafening. 47 faces turned to stare at me. I heard someone gasp, a glass hit the floor somewhere, and my Uncle Tom dropped his fork with a clatter. But what I remember most is my father nodding along, adding his own words to my mother's cruelty. Gabrielle has been nothing but disappointment after disappointment, he said. We gave her everything, and she gave us nothing in return. Emma was practically glowing, her hand over her heart in fake sympathy, her eyes shining with triumph. This was her moment, the final victory in a war I hadn't even known we were fighting. She had won. She was the only daughter that mattered, and now everyone knew it. I stood up slowly, my legs surprisingly steady. The necklace Marcus had given me felt warm against my skin, reminding me of my worth, of the life waiting for me outside this room. I looked around at all these faces, some shocked, some pitying, some clearly uncomfortable with what they had just witnessed. And I realized something important. I didn't owe these people my silence anymore. I remained standing, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable for everyone except me. My mother had started to sit down, probably expecting me to flee the room in tears, as I might have done years ago. Instead, I picked up my champagne glass and clinked it with a spoon, the sound sharp and clear in the quiet ballroom. Since we're sharing truths tonight, I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. Let me tell you about your perfect daughter. The real Emma, not the fiction you've all been sold. Emma's face went from triumphant to alarmed in seconds. Mom, she started, but I continued speaking, my voice growing stronger with each word. Let's start with the rehabilitation centers. 5 stays in 6 years, though you've probably only heard about 1 or 2. The first was for pills she stole from Mom's medical bag. The second for cocaine she was buying with Dad's credit cards. The third, fourth, and fifth were for various combinations of substances and behaviors that I won't detail, because unlike some people, I don't enjoy public humiliation for its own sake. My mother stood up again, her face flushing red. Gabrielle, how dare you lie, she began. But I pulled out my phone, grateful for the evidence I had been collecting for years, not knowing why until this moment. Would you like to see the receipts? I asked, holding up my phone. I have screenshots of the credit card statements Emma used to buy drugs. I have the emails she sent to her dealer from Dad's work email account. I have the invoice from the lawyer Dad hired to keep her third arrest out of the newspapers. Would you like me to share those with everyone here? The room was absolutely silent. My Aunt Barbara's mouth was hanging open. Dr. Catherine Winters, my mother's colleague and supposed best friend, had gone pale. I looked directly at her. Catherine, I said softly, you divorced your husband last year. Would you like to know why he really left? Or should I show everyone the photos of him with Emma at the Marriott downtown? The ones from your anniversary weekend when you were at that medical conference in Boston. Catherine stood up so fast, her chair fell backward. She looked at Emma with such fury that even I was taken aback. You, she said, her voice shaking, you were the woman. You destroyed my marriage. Emma was scrambling now, her perfect composure cracking. She's lying. She's jealous. She's always been jealous. I turned back to the room, addressing everyone now. Emma has stolen over $200,000 from our father's business accounts. She's fraudulently used our mother's medical credentials to obtain prescription drugs. She's borrowed money from at least 15 people in this room, money she never intended to pay back. Uncle Tom, you're still waiting for that $50,000, aren't you? Tom stood up, his face red. Robert, he said to my father, your daughter told me you knew about the loan, that you approved it. More people started speaking up, voices overlapping as they realized they had all been deceived. The Worthingtons mentioned $30,000 for a business investment that never materialized. Cousin Janet talked about $10,000 for a medical emergency that turned out to be cosmetic surgery. The numbers kept climbing, and with each revelation, my parents seemed to shrink into themselves. But I wasn't done. While you were all funding Emma's fictional life, I said, raising my voice above the chaos, let me tell you what your disappointment of a daughter was doing. I built a medical technology company from nothing. MedPredict's algorithms have saved over 10,000 lives by predicting cardiac events before they happen. We sold the company for $50 million when I was 28. The room went quiet again. Someone laughed nervously, thinking I was joking. I pulled out my phone again, this time showing the Time magazine article. Here's the Time 30 Under 30 feature. I used a pseudonym because I didn't want my family's name attached to my success. I bought a penthouse on the Upper East Side that's worth $12 million. I have an investment portfolio worth $30 million. I've donated $10 million to charity in the last 3 years alone. My father's face had gone from red to white. That's impossible, he said. You work in IT support. I laughed, actually laughed. I told you that because you never bothered to ask for details. You never attended my Yale graduation, so you didn't hear me give the valedictorian speech about innovation in healthcare. You didn't read my book, Invisible No More, which spent 6 months on the bestseller list. You don't even know that I've been in a relationship for 3 years with Marcus Chen, CEO of Chen Medical Innovations. As if on cue, Marcus walked through the ballroom doors. He had been waiting in the parking lot despite my insistence that I handle this alone. But he knew me well enough to know when I would need him. He walked directly to me, took my hand, and stood beside me, solid and real and mine. My mother sat down heavily, her hand at her throat. "This can't be true," she whispered. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in years. For a moment, I saw not the imposing surgeon, but a woman who had backed the wrong horse so completely that admitting it would destroy her entire worldview. But Emma, there was no pity there. She was cornered, exposed, and desperate. She lunged at me, her manicured nails aimed at my face. "Lying bitch," she screamed. "You've ruined everything." Marcus caught her wrist before she could touch me, and 2 of the country club's security guards appeared, apparently summoned by the manager who had been watching the scene unfold. Emma collapsed into theatrical sobs, but nobody moved to comfort her. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder I had brought, hoping I wouldn't need it, but knowing I probably would. I handed it to my father. "Here's documentation of everything. Emma's arrest, the fraud, the debts, the affairs. There are also contracts and patents proving everything about my success. Do what you want with the information, but don't ever contact me again, claiming I'm the disappointment." The room erupted into chaos. People were arguing, demanding their money back from Emma, confronting my parents about the lies they had been told. Dr. Catherine was on the phone with her lawyer. Uncle Tom was threatening to press charges. Emma was screaming that everyone was against her, that she was the victim here. My parents, the dignified surgeon, and the prestigious lawyer looked small and lost in the middle of the chaos they had created. My mother reached out to me, her hand trembling. "Gabrielle, please, we need to talk about this." I stepped back out of her reach. "We had 40 years to talk. You chose to spend them talking about Emma instead. You made your choice very clear tonight. You wish she was your only child. Well, congratulations. Your wish is granted." My father found his voice, the lawyer in him, trying to regain control. "You're still our daughter. You can't just walk away from family." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Family. You taught me what family means. Family is Emma stealing from you while you blamed me for not giving you grandchildren. Family is you canceling my 10th birthday party for Emma's fake fever. Family is telling a room full of people you wish I didn't exist. That's your definition of family, not mine." I turned to address the room one last time. "For those of you who have been genuinely kind to me over the years, thank you. For those Emma owes money to, good luck getting it back. And for those who stood by and watched a child be emotionally neglected for 31 years and said nothing, I hope you never have to watch your own children go through what you let me endure." Emma made one last desperate attempt. "You can't leave. You have to help me. You have all that money. Family helps family." I looked at her, really looked at her for the last time. She was 31 years old, unemployed, addicted, and completely unable to take responsibility for any of it. She was exactly what our parents had created, a person who believed she deserved everything simply for existing. Emma, I said quietly, you're right. Family does help family, which is why I won't be helping you. As Marcus and I walked toward the door, I heard my mother's voice one more time, high and desperate. Gabrielle, please, we're your parents. I stopped at the doorway and turned back one final time. No, I said. You're Emma's parents. You made that clear tonight and every night before this one. I'm done being your ghost. The walk to the parking lot felt surreal, like I was floating above my own body watching this woman in a black dress walk away from everything she had once desperately wanted to belong to. Marcus kept his hand on my back, steady and reassuring, not saying anything, because he understood that sometimes silence is the most powerful support you can offer. We reached his car, the Tesla he had driven, despite my insistence he stay away. He opened the passenger door for me, and I collapsed into the seat, my legs finally giving way to the trembling I had been suppressing. He got in beside me, started the car, but didn't drive. We sat there in the country club parking lot watching through the windows as people streamed out of the building, their animated conversations and shocked expressions visible even from a distance. My phone started buzzing immediately. Calls from my parents, texts from Emma, messages from relatives who had my number. I watched the notifications pile up without reading them, then powered off the phone entirely. Marcus reached over and took my hand, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on my palm. Do you want to go home? He asked softly. I thought about it, about the penthouse waiting for us in Manhattan, about the life I had built there. But something felt unfinished. Not yet, I said. Can we drive around for a while? He understood immediately. We drove through my old neighborhood, past the house where I grew up, that 7-bedroom colonial with its perfect lawn and invisible fence. The lights were off, of course. My parents would probably stay at the country club for hours, dealing with the aftermath of tonight's revelations. We drove past my elementary school, the park where I used to escape to read, the library where I spent more time than at home. As we drove, I started talking, not about tonight, but about all the nights before. I told Marcus about the birthday parties that never happened, the recitals attended alone, the achievements that went unnoticed. I told him about learning to forge my parents' signatures on permission slips because they couldn't be bothered to sign them. About cooking my own dinners at age 10 because family dinner only happened when Emma wanted it. About crying myself to sleep and training myself to cry quietly so I wouldn't disturb anyone. Marcus listened to it all, occasionally squeezing my hand, never interrupting, never trying to fix it or minimize it or explain it away. When I finally ran out of words somewhere on Interstate 95 heading back to New York, he simply said, "You are the strongest person I know, and you deserved so much better." We got back to the penthouse just after midnight. The city lights sparkled below us, life continuing on as if my entire world hadn't just shifted on its axis. I stood on the terrace, still in my party dress, looking out at the life I had built without them, for myself. By myself. Marcus brought me a cup of tea and a blanket wrapping both around me with the kind of care I had never received as a child. The next 6 months passed in a blur of extremes. The first week, the attempts at contact were relentless. My parents called from different numbers when I blocked theirs. Emma sent emails to my business address when I blocked her personal one. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered I existed and wanted to mediate, to help us reconcile, to remind me that family is family. I responded to none of it. Instead, I threw myself into something new. Marcus and I had been talking about expanding to California, setting up a West Coast office for our combined ventures. Within a month, we had found office space in Palo Alto, hired a team of brilliant engineers and medical professionals, and launched our newest project, an AI system that could detect childhood developmental issues early enough to make real interventions possible. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was building technology to ensure no child would go unnoticed the way I had. 3 months after the party, Marcus proposed. Not in some grand gesture, but quietly, privately, on a random Thursday morning over coffee. He said he had been carrying the ring for months, waiting not for the perfect moment, but for the moment when I seemed most myself, most free. That morning, laughing about a bug in our code while wearing pajamas and his MIT sweatshirt was apparently that moment. We married 2 months later in a small ceremony in Napa Valley with 20 guests. Jennifer was my maid of honor, her family filling the roles my own family should have played. Marcus's parents, who had embraced me from the moment he introduced us, walked me down the aisle together, his mother whispering in Mandarin that I was the daughter she had always hoped for. During this time, information trickled in through the gossip network about my family's situation. Uncle Tom had pressed charges against Emma for fraud. The investigation uncovered more than even I had known about forged checks, identity theft, credit cards opened in our parents' names without their knowledge. The $50,000 my parents had given her for her latest business venture had gone straight into her dealers' pockets. My father's law firm conducted an internal investigation after several clients complained about missing funds from their trust accounts. While my father wasn't directly implicated, the scandal of his daughter's crimes and the public spectacle at the country club had destroyed his reputation. He was forced into early retirement, his cases redistributed to other partners who whispered about how the mighty had fallen. My mother faced her own professional reckoning. The medical board investigated the prescription fraud, and while she kept her license, she was put on probation. The hospital where she had worked for 20 years suggested she take an indefinite leave of absence. The combination of professional humiliation and social exile from the country club circle broke something in her. I heard from Aunt Margaret that she had aged 10 years and 6 months. Emma was arrested 4 months after the party. She had been caught trying to sell pills to an undercover officer desperate for money, since my parents could no longer fund her lifestyle. The judge, who had access to her extensive history that my parents had paid to keep sealed, wasn't lenient. She was sentenced to 18 months in minimum security prison, with mandatory rehabilitation upon release. The family home, that 7-bedroom colonial that had been the stage for so much neglect, went into foreclosure. My parents had mortgaged it repeatedly to fund Emma's failures, and without my father's income and with the legal bills piling up, they couldn't keep up with the payments. They moved into a small apartment in Bridgeport, a far cry from the suburban paradise they had cultivated for so long. Aunt Margaret reached out once 6 months after everything fell apart. She didn't ask me to forgive them or help them. She just wanted me to know that she was sorry. Sorry for all the birthday parties she attended where I was ignored. Sorry for all the Christmases where Emma's presence overwhelmed the tree, while mine were afterthoughts. Sorry for being another adult who saw a child suffering and did nothing. Her apology was unexpected and surprisingly healing in its own way. My second book, Breaking Free from Toxic Family, was published under my real name. I didn't hide anymore. The book detailed not just my story, but the stories of dozens of others who had found the strength to walk away from family members who hurt them. It became a bestseller within a week, and the speaking engagements that followed allowed me to meet thousands of people who understood that DNA doesn't equal leave, that family isn't always forever, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is leave. Marcus and I built our California company into something remarkable. Within a year, we had contracts with major hospital systems across the country. Our technology was identifying children with autism, ADHD, and other developmental differences years earlier than traditional methods. We were literally changing lives, giving children the interventions they needed when their brains were still plastic enough to make real difference. Some nights I still dream about that family party. Not with regret, but with a strange sense of gratitude. It was the night everything finally became clear, the night the masks came off, the night I stopped pretending we were something we had never been. I dream about my mother's face when she said those words, wishing Emma was her only child. In the dream, I sometimes thank her for finally being honest, for finally saying out loud what her actions had been screaming for 31 years. Because that honesty, cruel as it was, set me free in a way that all my success and money never could have. The truth about family is that we don't get to choose the one we're born into. We don't get to pick parents who will see us, celebrate us, love us the way we deserve. Some of us get parents who pick favorites who love conditionally, who damage us in ways that take decades to understand and even longer to heal from. But here's what I learned: we do get to choose how long we let them keep hurting us. I spent 31 years trying to earn love that was never available to me. I achieved everything possible, thinking surely this accomplishment, this success, this achievement would finally make them see me. But you can't earn something that someone has already decided not to give you. You can't become enough for people who have decided you're too much or not enough based on nothing you've done, but simply because of who you are. Emma was their child in a way. I never could be. Not because she was better or more deserving, but because something in her matched something in them. The cruelty, perhaps, the shallowness, the ability to use people without guilt. She was their true reflection, and I was the anomaly, the child who somehow emerged from their DNA but never fit their mold. For years after that party, people would ask me if I regret what I did, if I wish I had handled it differently, more privately, with more grace. The answer is always no. Grace and privacy were what allowed the neglect to continue for 3 decades. Silence was what enabled them to maintain their fiction. That public revelation wasn't cruel. It was necessary. Not for revenge, but for truth. The real tragedy isn't what happened to my parents, or even to Emma. They made their choices, created their reality, and eventually had to face the consequences. The real tragedy is the little girl who spent years believing she was unlovable, because the people who were supposed to love her most couldn't see her at all. The real tragedy is all the other invisible children in perfectly nice houses, wondering what they did wrong to deserve being ignored. But here's what I want those children to know. It's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You don't need to earn basic human recognition from your own family. You are not responsible for your parents' emotional limitations. You are allowed to succeed without their permission to thrive, without their approval to build a beautiful life without their participation. I want them to know that chosen family is real family, that the people who see you, who celebrate you, who show up for you consistently, those are your people regardless of shared DNA. Jennifer and her family, who embraced me when my own family couldn't, they're my family. Marcus and his parents who welcomed me without reservation, they're my family. The community of survivors I've built through my books and speaking, they're my family. My parents are still alive, still living in that apartment in Bridgeport. Emma was released from prison, and last I heard was living with them again, the 3 of them in a 2-bedroom apartment, probably still blaming me for their downfall. I don't know the details because I don't ask, and the people who might tell me know better than to offer information I haven't requested. Sometimes I wonder if they ever have moments of clarity, if my mother ever remembers the 5-year-old showing her a drawing, if my father ever thinks about the graduation speech he barely heard. I wonder if Emma ever acknowledges, even to herself, that she destroyed not just her own life, but our parents as well. But these wonderings are brief and rare, like checking an old scar that has long since stopped hurting. Marcus and I have 2 children now, twins named David and Sophia. They're 3 years old, the same age I was when Emma was born, and everything changed. I watch them carefully, making sure neither ever feels less than the other. When David draws a picture, we celebrate it. When Sophia says a new word, we celebrate that too. Equal attention, equal love, equal visibility. It's not hard when you're paying attention, when you remember that children are people, not possessions, not extensions of yourself, but unique individuals deserving of being seen. My success in business continues to grow. The combined value of our companies is now approaching $500 million. We employ 300 people, have saved countless lives through our medical technology, and have created interventions that help thousands of children get the support they need. I've published 4 books now, all bestsellers, all helping people heal from various forms of childhood trauma. But the success that matters most to me happens in small moments. When Marcus and I have breakfast with our children and everyone gets heard. When we visit his parents and I'm treated like a beloved daughter. When Jennifer calls just to chat, and I know she actually wants to hear the answer when she asks how I am. These moments of genuine connection, of being truly seen and valued, they're worth more than all the money and accolades in the world. The night of that party taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop protecting people from the truth. My family had built their entire identity on a lie, the lie that Emma was perfect, and I was the problem. By maintaining that lie through my silence, I was complicit in my own erasure. Speaking the truth didn't destroy them. The truth itself destroyed them. I just stopped being the one holding it back. Looking back now, I realize that party was a gift. Not a pleasant one, but a necessary one. It was the final push I needed to stop hoping for something that was never going to happen. It was the closure I didn't know I needed, the definitive ending that allowed me to truly begin. Some nights I still dream about that family party, not with regret, but with gratitude. It was the night I finally stopped being their disappointment and started being my own success story. The truth didn't just set me free, it gave me wings. And I've been flying ever since. To anyone watching this who sees themselves in my story, who knows what it's like to be invisible in your own family, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve to be seen, to be celebrated, to be loved for exactly who you are. And if your biological family can't do that, I promise you there are people out there who can and will. Sometimes you have to leave the family you were given to find the family you deserve. And that's not giving up. That's growing up. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who couldn't see your worth? Have you found your chosen family? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you are worthy of love and recognition exactly as you are, whether your family sees it or not.